Okay, today we are going to work on the reading. We are in the very midst of a revolution. Our goal is to read and analyze the text. You're going to need the copy of pages 39 to 41 from the book Revolution, your notes worksheet, a highlighter, and a pen or pencil to complete this activity. So please make sure those are ready before you move on with the video, or you can pause right here. Okay, now that I have my worksheet out, the first thing that I'm going to do is take my pen and I'm going to number the questions down the side of here. I'm going to do that before I even start reading. This way, as we're reading in the reading passage, I can kind of mark down where my answers are as I'm reading, and I can refer back to those at the end. So let's just go down the side and number these with our pen. Once you've numbered those 1 through 12, we can continue on to our reading with both your highlighter and your pen. So I'm going to start reading right here. You might not be able to read mine, but you can follow along on your own. And I'm going to ask that you do your highlighting or marking up right in this text as I do it. This way you can refer back when you go to answer the questions on your own. It says, "They came in the night, slipping through the Verrazano and into the harbor. New Yorkers looking out onto the water the next morning, June 29, 1776, were stunned by what they saw. I was upstairs and spied, as I peeped out the bay, something resembled a wood of pine trees trimmed. I could not believe my eyes," recalled Daniel McCurtain, a private in the new Continental Army stationed in Brooklyn. "I thought all London was afloat." Okay, right now I've already come across that date that I know was our first question. So I'm going to highlight that, and I see that they're telling me that that's the next morning. So whatever I'm going to write about for number 1 is going to be about what happened during this event. So I'm also going to put a little number 1 there so I can remember to look back in this area about what happened on June 29th, 1776. What McCurtain saw was an armada of over 100 British warships, including 5, the Centurion, the Chatham, the Greyhound, the Phoenix, and the Asia, that among them carried more firepower than all of the American guns arrayed to protect the city. These ships were the most fearsome, most modern machines of war available, used to project the power of the British Empire around the globe. Altogether, they carried 9,000 British regulars. When a few weeks later the ships floated up one by one and dropped anchor off Staten Island with colors flying, guns saluting, and soldiers continuously shouting, the local militia defected almost immediately. All summer long the ships kept coming. By mid-August there were more than 500 in the harbor, and some 32,000 British and German troops had been landed on Staten Island. "I feel for you and my other New York friends," an English sympathizer wrote to an American acquaintance, "for I expect your city to be laid in ashes." All right, well, I'm going to pause there because I definitely heard them talking about how many the size of the British Army by summer. Okay, so I'm going to put a 2 here because I definitely heard them saying that all summer long the ships kept coming, and by mid-August there were more than 500 in the harbor and some 32,000 British and German troops. Okay, so I'm going to remember that and go back to that later on, so make sure you take your highlighter and mark it as well, please. After many delays and equivocations here is meaning fancy or ambiguous language used to conceal the truth. So after many delays and equivocations on both sides, the war was about to resume in earnest. But serious questions remained about just whom it was between, 2 nations or a band of rebels and their right to sovereign. And what was its purpose? The redress of grievances by loyal British subjects, or the suppression of a revolution? As the warships gathered in New York Harbor, a group of 50 mostly wealthy, generally conservative, but badly divided men likewise gathered in Philadelphia, rushing to resolve such questions once and for all. In the 14 months since the first shots on Lexington Green, the Americans had scored one stunning success after another. British troops trying to storm Bunker Hill outside of Boston had lost 40% of their number, dead or wounded, and the Americans retreating only when they had run out of gunpowder. Great, that sounds like number 3. What were early Revolution battle results? Okay, so I'm going to put a number 3 here. Oops. Okay, so we can remember to go back here. And let's look at the important part. It says Americans had scored one stunning success after another. British troops losing 40% dead or wounded, and Americans retreating only when they run out of gunpowder. Now I'm not going to recopy those words exactly onto my notes page, but I'm going to use those ideas. The attempt by a small fleet of British ships to capture the port of Charleston, South Carolina, had been repulsed, driven back, and a boisterous band of Vermonters, who called themselves Green Mountain Boys, under the command of Ethan Allen and a bad-tempered but audacious general named Benedict Arnold, had taken the key frontier post of Fort Ticonderoga by surprise. An enormous 25-year-old Boston bookseller turned colonel, Henry Knox, had then miraculously transported much of the heavy artillery at Ticonderoga across the winter snows of New England to the troops in Boston, where the guns' very presence was enough to break the stalemate and force the British out of the city. Only an ill-starved effort to seize Canada, and thus deprive the British of a base there, has ended in a setback for the colonials. The Empire had regrouped in Halifax, Nova Scotia, putting together an enormous flotilla fleet, that means fleet in Spanish, under the command of two brothers, General William Howe and Admiral Lord Richard Black Dick Howe. By the time their expeditionary force was finally reassembled in New York Harbor, it would be the largest of any kind anywhere in the 18th century, and the largest such British force until the assault on D-Day during World War II. Its naval component alone stood at 40% of all the men and ships then active in the Royal Navy. It was also something of a bluff, one put together in the hope of ending the war without ever having to fire a shot. The expedition had cost £850,000, a prodigious sum at the time, and as such one that illuminated the problems that England would face in prosecuting the war. Oh, great. That told us right there how much this was costing England. So I'm going to put the number 4 here and highlight that information. Okay? And then we can continue on. Many English workingmen openly favored the American cause, making recruitment difficult and forcing the purchase of thousands of mercenaries from Germany, primarily from the state of Hesse-Kassel. Sending so many Hessians and Englishmen across the Atlantic and keeping them there would bankrupt the crown before long. Okay, so why was it difficult to find English recruits? And that's where our answer will be here. So why did they have a difficult time finding English recruits? Well, many English working men openly favored that American cause. So it was difficult to find people to be recruited to the army, and they had to purchase mercenaries or pay soldiers from other places. Okay, we're going to look at that a little bit further because I think we heard the answer for number 6 as well. So going back to right at the bottom of where we were highlighting number 5, sending so many Hessians and Englishmen across the Atlantic and keeping them there would bankrupt the crown before long. Scaring the rebels was preferable. So General Howe, who was mildly sympathetic to the American grievances and who had seen every one of his aides killed or wounded at Bunker Hill, agreed. So who are Hessians, which is number 6? We've just learned that Hessians are the mercenaries who were being paid to fight. So in our notes we're going to highlight that Hessians, and I'm going to put an arrow up there reminding us where they're from and that they're mercenaries from Germany. So we can use that information when we're filling in number 6. Okay? He made his preparations deliberately, sending out peace feelers, including a generous offer to the newly minted commander of the Continental Army, George Washington. Washington sent back the offer unopened, establishing the primacy of civilian authority in the American government by informing Howe that only the Continental Congress had the power to consider such agreements. So let's put a 7 here, showing where they're sending out that peace offering from the English to the new Continental Commander, George Washington. And why is he doing that? Well, he's saying that this General Howe's already seen his aides killed or wounded at Bunker Hill. So he's trying to send this peace offering to George Washington, which we know that he's sent back unopened, showing his refusal. Since May, the delegates of the Congress had been cloistered in Philadelphia's modest Carpenter's Hall. Cloisters means tucked away or sheltered. Increasingly tormented by the summer heat and the plague of flies, several colonies forbade for their delegates to vote for any declaration of independence, but the Congress had appointed a committee to draw one up just the same. Its members had turned that job over to a young, handsome Virginian squire and genius, Thomas Jefferson, who toiled away as the rest of Congress talked and talked. Okay, well that tells us number 8, who was Thomas Jefferson. So here we're going to mark number 8, the Thomas Jefferson, and he was given that job to write up a Declaration of Independence when everyone else was told not to do that. And he was from Virginia, and there's his name. Okay. And then we'll keep reading. July 1st dawned hot and humid. The delegates were bathed in sweat, and the windows were kept closed against the fearsome flies. There was added tension in the room. Everyone understood that the debate was close to reaching its conclusion, as the rumors of British fleet's arrival swept the city. Leading the opposition to independence was John Dickinson. I'm going to pause right there and put a number 9, because I know that's the question for number 9. They're asking us, what is John Dickinson's stance on independence? So let's see. He's leading the opposition, so that means he's opposed to or against this independence. Okay, and we'll keep reading and highlight a few more things about John Dickinson. It says that he's leading the opposition was John Dickinson, a tall, gaunt, and very wealthy Philadelphia lawyer. So I also highlighted on there that he's a Philadelphia lawyer, whom John Adams described as a shadow, pale as ashes, throughout the debate. Dickinson had a chief critic of the Crown, but he still hoped for reconciliation. Couching his arguments in practical terms, he pointed to the colony's disorganization and weaknesses. We are about to brave the storm in a skiff of paper. Rising to debate him was John Adams, the touchy, querulous attorney who had defended the British soldiers in the Boston Massacre 6 years earlier. Well, that's our 10th question. What is John Adams' view on independence? And here we can see who that is. That he's the attorney who defended the British soldiers, and he's debating Dickinson. And if he's debating Dickinson, who is opposed, we know that John Adams is going to be pro or for independence. Okay. Belaboring England's tyranny, calling for a new nation that would fit for the tenor of a new time. We are in the midst of a revolution, the most complete, unexpected, and remarkable of any in the history of the world, Adams told his colleagues. The object is great which we have in view, and we must expect great expense of blood to attain it. So he's talking about how we're going to have a great expense, or we're going to be paying a lot with blood or lives in order to earn this independence, which he feels is necessary. We need this new nation, this new independence. Okay, so that answers number 10 for us. A thunderstorm had blown up at last, shattering the infernal heat, and as Adams spoke, rain spattered against the windows and lightning creased the sky. Before he had finished, crucial new delegates came in, having just arrived after a hard journey through the night. Adams went through his arguments again for them, protesting that he felt like an actor hauled out to give one more encore. It would prove a fortunate delay. Before Congress could adjourn for the evening, a dispatch from General Washington was delivered, confirming the arrival of the British fleet. Now Adams' words, combined with the looming threat of the invasion, concentrated the delegates' minds. The following day, the previously recalcitrant South Carolina delegation, recalcitrant means obscenely uncooperative toward authority, so the uncooperative South Carolina delegation changed its vote and backed independence. Delaware delegate Caesar Rodney, that's our person for number 11, so let's put 11 by his name. Racked with back pain from facial cancer that would kill him, rode 80 miles through the rain and entered the hall in his boots and spurs to break a tie in his delegation and cast his state's vote for independence. So who is this? Caesar Rodney. We know that he is a Delaware delegate and that he rode 80 miles to cast his state's vote for independence. So he is pro-independence. In the end, the vote was unanimous, save for New York's abstention, meaning New York didn't vote. The colony's provincial assembly, distracted by its flight from Manhattan to White Plains in the wake of British fleet's arrival, had left its delegation without instructions. Jefferson's Declaration of Independence was approved. So there's our number 12, the Declaration of Independence. So you need a definition for that one there. So what is that Declaration of Independence? It was that paper saying what? What's the idea that now they're agreeing on? Okay, so if you missed any of those answers, you can go back through and reread. Remember, you want to put any of your notes onto your white notes paper because that's what you'll be able to use when taking the quiz.